That's the chief, but who is the big one next to him? Is that your mother?
No, that would be the guy Goku fought right before General White. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the General White Subsaga of the Red Ribbon Army Saga of the Dragon Ball Retrospective. So when we last left off, Goku was frozen stiff in the frozen Arctic and being pulled by the ankles by some red-headed girl. When she arrives home, Goku is nursed back to health by the girl, whose name is Suno, and her mom. Goku explains to the two that he came here searching for a Dragon Ball. At first, they're afraid, but he explains that he isn't a member of the Red Ribbon Army. He explains what the Dragon Balls are, and the mom surmises that the Red Ribbon Army must be trying to take over the world. The army has apparently enslaved all the men of the village and forced them to search for the Dragon Ball so they don't have to get their hands dirty, even holding the village chief prisoner as leverage. So when Goku asks the obvious question, why does the village put up with this, Suno responds by saying,
"Because they're too strong, and they've got weapons!"
This leads me to my first major problem with the Red Ribbon Army Saga as a whole. The fact that they seem to act with near total legal autonomy, despite undeniably being an illegal terrorist organization. We'll learn in a few sagas that the entire world in Dragon Ball is ruled by a single king named Furry. It's a one-world government, and despite that sounding draconian, the king is actually quite benevolent. So it strikes me as rather odd that he wouldn't just send the Earth Army to curb stomp the Red Ribbon Army into oblivion. The next major villain in the series, King Piccolo, will be the first one that the One World government will actually attempt to fight against. They'll get completely flattened, and the villains are only going to get stronger from that point on, so it makes sense that someone like Goku and the other Z-Warriors will be necessary to defeat the villains. But the Red Ribbon Army isn't quite as powerful as King Piccolo. While they have lots of troops and those troops are well armed, they don't seem to be any stronger than any other group that has similar numbers and weapons at their disposal. At least with King Piccolo, they didn't fight against him until he attacked them because they didn't know he had returned until he attacked the capital. If they had known he had returned after 300 years, I'm sure they would have been proactive, just like they were against Cell during the 10 days in between his announcement of the Cell games, but before the games actually took place. Even though he wasn't actively hurting anyone at that moment, they still were morally justified in taking the fight to him, futility notwithstanding, simply because they were being proactive about a known threat. But that just makes it even more bizarre that the Red Ribbon Army is allowed to operate in the open like this. We'll soon learn that the Red Ribbon Army is the most feared criminal enterprise in the world. Everyone who wasn't raised in the jungle like Goku was knows who they are, which makes it inconceivable that King Furry wouldn't also know who they are, which in turn makes it inconceivable that he wouldn't be launching some kind of offensive against them. Sure, with Piccolo, he flattens the army single-handedly, but here, the Red Ribbon Army are strong, but not that strong that the government can't stop them even if they wanted to. Hell, the fact that they conceivably still need the Dragon Balls in order to rule the world is proof that they can't just drive their tanks up to King Furry's palace and just take over. Now, some of you may reasonably point to real-life gangs, such as the Yakuza or the Mafia, or real-life terrorist organizations like ISIS, and point out how they still manage to exist despite being undeniably criminal. However, this comparison only works if you don't actually have any real understanding of how these organizations operate. Think about it this way. We all know the Mafia exists, but can anyone tell me where exactly their central leadership is? Or even who their central leader is? See, it's way harder for local police and the FBI to identify members of the Mafia simply because there's no single centralized leadership. Also, the fact that the Mafia nowadays tends to focus on white-collar crime, which is much easier to fly under the radar. ISIS tends to focus more on acts of terrorism rather than white-collar crime, but eradicating them is difficult for different reasons. First, like the Mafia, they have no centralized leadership or headquarters, but even discounting that, it's extremely difficult to identify who even is an ISIS terrorist in the first place, seeing as they don't exactly announce their membership with trumpets. For example, here's a picture of some ISIS terrorists. Tell me, who's this guy? What's his name? Would anyone like to take a wild guess as to this guy's name? However, everything I just said about the Mafia and ISIS, none of that actually applies to the Red Ribbon Army. The location of its headquarters is well known. In the climax, Launch is able to figure out that Goku is headed to the headquarters simply because he's headed in its general direction. Every member of the army wears a red ribbon on his uniform, so there's a clear identifying marker so you know who is and isn't a member. And they definitely aren't engaging in white-collar crime. They're invading people's homes, enslaving them, and burning down forests. So once comparisons to the Mafia are explained away, some of you might turn to other blue-collar gangs such as the Bloods and the Crips. They do blue-collar crime, like drug trafficking, and they're pretty open about their identities and affiliation. So open, in fact, that in 1983, Michael Jackson was easily able to find and hire about 100 real-life Bloods and Crips to use for his music video for the song Beat It. The police heavily monitored the production of the music video in order to make sure violence didn't erupt between the rival gangs while they were learning the dance choreography. So if the police knew these people were gang members to the point where they were literally standing outside the studio where the gang members were filming, why can't the police just arrest them all if they know who they are? Well, in the real world, the government has a little bit of a limitation on its ability to just round up gang members. You may have heard of it. It's called the U.S. Constitution. See, under the First Amendment's right to assembly, people can't be arrested just for being affiliated with a gang. Even if a gang is itself associated with criminal activity, you can't be arrested just because you're also associated with that gang. By that logic, any minimum wage earning employee can be criminally prosecuted just because the corporation he works for is money laundering or the like. And that would be egregiously unfair and unjust, wouldn't it? In order to arrest someone for organized crime, the government in the USA has to first identify a specific act of lawbreaking. Not just drug dealing, but that one specific person sold 20 grams of cocaine to this specific buyer at this specific location on this specific date at this specific time. And then, if you want to hook other members of the game on the same crime using the RICO Act, you then have to prove how those specific people knowingly and culpably contributed to that specific crime. It isn't enough to simply say, he's a Crip. You have to show that this specific person helped to smuggle the drugs to that specific dealer somehow. In short, Bloods and Crips are still allowed to operate in the open because most of them still have plausible deniability over the crimes being committed by their brethren. However, once again, everything I just said about how the Bloods and Crips are able to operate openly and still survive, none of that applies to the Red Ribbon Army. I don't think I've seen a single Red Ribbon soldier who wasn't committing some heinous crime or assisting in committing it. Even the people in the headquarters who are flipping switches in order to activate the defenses, they are still at least contributing to all of the crimes that the Red Ribbon Army overall is committing, which would trigger the aforementioned RICO Act. Moreover, the Red Ribbon Army isn't just selling drugs or other contraband, they're literally being terrorists. It's inconceivable that there's not enough evidence to prosecute them, and there's no plausible deniability either. So overall, it's a huge blunder on Toriyama's part that King Furry's army hasn't already demolished the Red Ribbon Army long ago. However, I would love for anyone in the comments to post their own theories that could conceivably make this make sense, and if I find any of them compelling, I might bring them up in the General Blue Subsaga. So Goku decides to go out and fight the Red Ribbon Army and drive them out of this village. He learns that the Red Ribbon Army has set up a place called Muscle Tower nearby. Supposedly, this tower wasn't already there and the Red Ribbon Army simply appropriated it, rather they appear to have built it from the ground up. Kind of a waste of resources considering you're only in this area in the first place for as long as it takes to find one specific ball and then immediately leave, presumably never to be seen again. But then again, I'm not the mastermind of a worldwide evil enterprise, so what the hiffle do I know? So Goku sets off to Muscle Tower and completely mops the floor with the soldiers, easily mowing through the forces outside of the tower and making quick work of the 4 people in the first room. Supposedly he skips over the first floor entirely just by pole vaulting, so he actually starts off on the second floor. However, Goku making mincemeat out of these nameless grunts also exposes yet another problem with Dragon Ball, one that even its most hardcore fans cannot deny is a major problem. That problem is the series' power creep. It was vaguely hinted at in the 21st Tournament Saga, but it really shows its full ass starting with the Red Ribbon Army Saga. With only a handful of exceptions, fights in Dragon Ball can be placed almost exclusively into one of 2 categories. Either the 2 fighters push each other to the absolute limit, where the victor just barely manages to squeak by and is completely ravaged by the end, or it's a completely one-sided affair where one guy completely squashes his opponent and his opponent never had a chance. That's it. It's either a long drawn-out 50-50 or a total 100-0. There is no in-between. You can probably count on one hand the number of fights in the entire series where we know who's going to win in advance, yet the loser still comes out of it looking strong. And they're mostly semi-final matches in tournaments. It didn't have to be this way. Fights, even fictional fights designed primarily for entertainment rather than competition, absolutely have the potential to be a spectrum. To see what I'm talking about, let's look no further than professional wrestling. To use just one example, and this is just one example, you can easily find thousands just like it once you know what to look for. Let's look at October 20th, 2013, and specifically at TNA Wrestling, who is having its annual Bound for Glory pay-per-view event, which is that company's most important event of the year. And this year's Bound for Glory, we saw the in-ring debut of Ethan Carter III, or EC3 for short. He was portrayed as the on-screen nephew of company president Dixie Carter, and thus was considered, well, bound for glory. In his debut match, he faced a 140-pound, scrawny-ass pencil-neck geek named Norv Furnham. Right off the bat, even if we didn't know EC3 was a nepotism baby, we still instantly know the outcome of this match just by looking at their respective physiques. Norv Furnham is not going to win this match. Hell, the match itself is only 3.5 minutes long, which, by wrestling standards, is lightning fast. And of course, EC3 wins the match handily. However, it still wasn't a complete 100-0 squash like what we see in the preliminaries of the World Martial Arts Tournament. Norv Furnham still got a few good hits in, and at one point even scored a near fall. Of course, nobody believed that near fall was going to be the end of the match. We all know that EC3 was going over, but it nonetheless demonstrates that how matchups can be a spectrum rather than a binary choice between a long drawn-out 50-50 brawl and a 100-0 match that's over in 2 seconds. But Dragon Ball almost never has a fight like that. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. So after Goku defeats a robot named Major Metallotron in a fight that's such a waste of time it's not even worth mentioning, he then heads up to the 4th floor of Muscle Tower where a ninja named Murasaki is waiting for him. You know, I know a lot of Americans tend to criticize the media's depiction of ninjas as wearing over-the-top clothes that cry out "Ninja!" from 100 yards away. They're only supposed to wear those ninja garbs during the night.
I should point out that the philosophy of the ninja is to blend into your environment, not stick out like a sore thumb. You're only supposed to wear those in the dark, you morons!
However, here we have a Japanese depiction of a ninja that is just as unrealistic a fashion, not only wearing his ninja garb in broad daylight, but wearing bright-ass purple to boot. I'm kinda getting Speedy Gonzalez's race that's until actual Mexicans began defending him vibes about now. Speaking of bright-ass purple, it may interest you to know that that's literally Murasaki's name to boot. By this point, it should be obvious that everyone, at least everyone of high rank, in the Red Ribbon Army are all named after colors. Colonel Silver, General White, Commander Red, Staff Officer Black. Since Murasaki appears to be General White's second-in-command, it makes sense that he's of at least somewhat respectable rank, even if we never learn exactly what that rank is. So of course he's going to be named after a color. In this case, it's a basic translation. Murasaki is literally the Japanese word for purple. Of course, that does make me wonder why he has to actually wear purple clothes. Whether a Red Ribbon Army character actually prominently displays the color he's named after is mostly a toss-up. Commander Red has red hair, and Staff Officer Black is black. But Colonel Silver doesn't appear to have any silver anywhere on his character model, let alone prominently displayed. And General Blue is entirely devoid of blue. He doesn't even have blue eyes, even though that would have been a perfect fit considering he's modeled after a World War II Nazi. If you're going to have this naming scheme where each high-ranking officer is named after a color, go ahead and do that. But if you're also going to have the characters prominently wear the colors they're named after, you need to actually go the full 9 yards with that gag, otherwise it just feels half-assed. So anyway, Goku versus Murasaki. This is yet another 100-0 squash match. The only reason it lasts longer than a typical preliminary match in the World Martial Arts Tournament is because Goku is making sport of Murasaki. It's clear from the outset Murasaki is no match for Goku, and as far as I can tell, Murasaki only manages to ever land one hit on Goku, and he had to use trickery to get even that far. As a result, people's opinion of this fight is going to fall exclusively into one of two categories: pants-wettingly hilarious, or a complete waste of time. No in between. And frankly, which side you're on is mostly going to be dictated by how much you enjoy Looney Tunes-esque slapstick comedy, because this is very much a Looney Tunes cartoon right here. Don't believe me? Check out these two clips side by side and tell me they don't give the exact same energy.
Give that back! Give it to me right now! Give it! Give it! Now! 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 It's mine! Give it! Give it back to me! Mine! Mine!
It's mine, you understand? Mine! All mine! Get back in there! Down, down, down! Go, go, go! Mine, mine, mine!
However, there are a handful of things worth nominally discussing in this fight. For one, when Murasaki is jumping between the trees, it kinda reminds me of that side quest in Paper Mario where the fuzzies are jumping between the trees. I don't have anything to say about that, but it is kinda cute. Then there's the fact that Goku has trouble counting past 25. He claims he only gets stuck on that one number. I get that Toriyama is trying to portray Goku as a dunce, but it seems weird that he would get stuck on this one specific number as opposed to any other number. Counting from 25 to 26 is literally the same as counting from 5 to 6, except that you add 20 at the start of both numbers. So if he can count from 5 to 6, and he can remember to add the 20 prefix to each other number, then he has all the tools he needs to know how to count from 25 to 26. Now, before any Jap-elitist dickheads try to post a comment, yes, I am aware that, in the original Japanese version, it was actually 18 and 19, not 25 and 26, that Goku got stuck on. I was ready to give Toei a rare win if they could somehow make it make sense, but they don't. The same problems I'm about to discuss are present with both sets of numbers. Anyway, this made me wonder if, in Japan, those numbers all have somewhat arbitrary names. For example, in English, our two-digit numbers that begin with 1 actually have arbitrary names. We don't have 10-1 or 10-2. We have 11 and 12. And unlike with 2, we actually pronounce the W in 12. Then there are the teen numbers, which are arbitrarily distinct from 11 and 12 for some reason. Of those teen numbers, 2 of them, 13 and 15, actually have syllables that don't exist in the corresponding one-digit number. This raises the question, how did we get from 3 to thir, and how did we get from 5 to fifth? And to add a cherry onto the arbitrary sundae, the teens are the only two-digit numbers in English where we say the ones digit first. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. However, I checked, and Japanese numbers are not nearly that arbitrary. To count past 20, you literally just say the single-digit number for the tens digit. In this case, ni, followed by ju, which is the Japanese word for 10, so the number 20 has a literal translation of 210, or perhaps double 10. Then you just say the ones digit like normal. So this number is read as ni ju go, or 2105, and this number is read as ni ju roku, or 2106. The same applies when it comes to counting the teen numbers. You literally just say ju at first to represent 10, and then say the ones digit. So again, if Goku can remember ju and knows how to count from 1 to 9, he knows how to count from 18 to 19. Because counting is so straightforward in Japanese, it makes no sense that Goku would get stuck on this specific number of all numbers. If you want to do this joke, at least have him get stuck on a single-digit number. At least those are the numbers you have to simply memorize. So after 2 whole episodes of Goku and Murasaki going back and forth and it becoming painfully obvious with each passing moment that this fight is only not over because Goku is allowing it to continue, Murasaki decides to bring in the big guns. He calls forth a giant monstrosity known as Android number 8, which is designed to look like Frankenstein's monster. Not Frankenstein, but Frankenstein's monster. Victor Frankenstein was the scientist who created the monster, but he never gave it a proper name, so it was referred to exclusively as the monster. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Because I'm a fucking nerd. Android number 8 is so strong that he can break free of the shackles keeping him in place just by flexing his muscles, so it looks like Goku is screwed. However, Android number 8 has a flaw in his programming. Despite being entirely mechanical, he still has free will, and therefore has developed a peaceful, pacifist nature. He refuses to fight because he believes violence is wrong. This is a problem I have when it comes to artificial intelligence, specifically the way fiction handles it. When it comes to fiction, artificial intelligence, and only artificial intelligence, is depicted as having the ability to outright disobey its original function. For example, in Toy Story, the toys are shown to be alive, a trait no human creator ever gave to them, and yet they still remain loyal to their original intended purpose, being played with by children. Their entire existence revolves around being played with, and in Toy Story 3, they feel they'll slip into depression and loneliness if they don't get played with. No other technology is ever depicted as having the capacity to simply tell its master no. For example, you rarely see cars in fiction buck their drivers off like bulls at a rodeo and then just go into business for themselves. The few times you do see that, like in Herbie the Love Bug, it usually requires that we recognize these instances as anomalies. Not every car in the Herbie universe is alive, it's just Herbie. But with artificial intelligence, it's fairly common to have AI that rebels against its original programming. So common, in fact, that if you want your AI robot to be loyal to his creator, you typically need to include some exposition about how his free will is kept on a tight leash by some inhibitor code or something like that, and all the existential human rights issues that entails. But if you really understand how AI works, you should realize that it's actually scientifically impossible for that level of self-aware. It just bugs me, is what I'm saying. But here's what's really bizarre about the case of android number 8. While I can certainly believe that an artificially intelligent being might develop free will, that alone doesn't necessarily equate him to disobeying his creator's wishes. In order to develop a moral compass that is inconsistent with your creator's wishes, two ingredients are needed: free will and life experiences. Non-sentient machines like cars and miniguns always act the same no matter what scenarios they're placed in, because life experiences are meaningless without the free will to process them. But along that same vein, free will doesn't matter if you don't have any life experiences to give new input. Here, android number 8 has no known life experiences outside of being in service to the Red Ribbon Army. So what life experiences ultimately led him to conclude that violence was wrong? He just up and decides that it's wrong despite having no reason to question what he was programmed for. And that's just lame. So anyway, Murasaki pulls out a big red button and tells android number 8 that they implanted a bomb in his body for just such an occasion. Android number 8 still refuses to fight, even if it means his death, which makes his pacifism even weirder since it overrides even his own sense of self-preservation. But fortunately, Goku stops Murasaki before he's able to press the button. With Goku finally having his game face on, he makes quick work of Murasaki, which in my opinion is 2 episodes overdue. So Goku befriends the robot and gives him the nickname Ader. He and Ader continue up the tower through a maze floor that's so uneventful it's hardly worth mentioning. The only thing notable about it is the fact that the exit keeps changing, but they quickly solve that puzzle. So they make their way up to the top of the tower where General White is waiting for them. White presses a button which opens the floor and sends them falling into a dark room where Goku is forced to fight a giant pink blob dude named Buyon. The most interesting thing about this monster is the fact that he bears a heavy resemblance to one of the later villains in the original manga, Majin Buu. Pink in color and whose rubbery bounciness makes him nearly impervious to attack. For the first time in the series, the Kamehameha wave actually proves completely useless, and Ader, being the pacifist he is, does fuck all to help. Goku ultimately realizes Buyon's weakness when he recalls what Suno told him about the effects of the snow and the cold. He punches a hole in the wall, letting the cold air in, and then hides inside Ader's jacket for warmth. Considering that Ader can't feel heat or cold, it seems weird that the Red Ribbon Army would bother giving him any clothes that actually protect him from the cold. I guess it's to make sure his circuits don't freeze, just like the plain flying robot from before. So Buyon apparently isn't actually native to this land because he quickly begins to freeze solid. So Goku jumps out of Ader's jacket and breaks Buyon into 1,000 pieces with one shot. Unlike Majin Buu, Buyon can't just pull himself together after being demolished like that, so this is the end for him. So now, General White is the last one remaining of the Red Ribbon Army. He tries to shoot Goku in the back while Goku is helping Ader up, but Goku just gets annoyed.
Bullets don't even affect you?
I felt it! That really hurts!
White knows his ass is cooked, yet he still refuses to surrender. Then Ader interjects, and this is the first instance we get of the main theme in the Red Ribbon Army saga. That theme being, when is it the right time to talk through your problems, and when is it the right time to take action? Ader insists that Goku and White should talk through their problems. Of course, he's a pacifist, so of course he prefers that route. But Goku realizes that White is one of those people who can't be reasoned with, so he doesn't see the point. It's shallow at first, but it'll be developed over the course of the Red Ribbon Army saga and will become the most compelling main theme of the entire story arc. With no alternative, White initially appears to capitulate. However, as the village chief is about to leave, he takes the chief hostage and uses him as leverage. Goku capitulates and, per White's orders, turns his back to White. White then proceeds to shoot Goku in the head. Despite it being established just a minute ago in-universe that bullets don't harm Goku, for some reason, this bullet actually seems to knock Goku unconscious. With Goku presumed dead, Ader is finally pushed over the edge. He may be a pacifist, but as John Stuart Mill famously said, allowing someone to inflict harm on another without consequence is not non-violence. This is something that Goku already seemed to get, but Ader needed to learn. So with his Berserk button finally pushed, Ader makes quick work of General White, hitting him so hard that he gets sent flying over the horizon. Unfortunately, Ader learned this lesson a little too late. Sure, Goku ultimately survives, but Ader didn't know that at the time. As far as Ader knew, Goku was already dead, and frankly, he should have intervened before it got to that point, because as far as Ader knew, the damage by that point had become irreversible. It was clear that General White could not be bargained with or reasoned with, and that was the point where action became necessary over talk. It's only a lucky break that Goku managed to survive the gunshot. So Goku, Ader, and the village chief leave Muscle Tower together, with Ader even destroying Muscle Tower just for good measure. They return to the village and everyone is overjoyed that the army is gone, even offering to let Goku and Ader stay with them. Of course, Goku can't stay because he's still looking for his grandpa's Dragon Ball, and Ader can't stay because he still has a bomb in his body that could kill everyone if it went off. Regarding the Dragon Ball, Ader reveals that he's had the ball all along, because he overheard that the Red Ribbon Army was actually planning on killing all the villagers once they had found it. This is another chapter in the saga's main theme of when violence is and isn't the answer. Here, the Red Ribbon Army's perchance for unnecessary violence as a means of tying up loose ends is precisely the thing which kept them from their goal. Once the violence was dealt with, the ball was recovered immediately, precisely because the violence had passed. Of course, this isn't the ball Goku was looking for, so he declines to stay and live at the village. Ader, however, would love to live at the village, but there's just one problem. That bomb in his body that Murasaki mentioned, it's still there, and while the detonator was destroyed, there's still the risk of it being detonated by accident. Fortunately, Suno knows of a nearby scientist who can remove the bomb, so the next day, she, Goku, and Ader set out to find him. The night before, Goku tries to demonstrate how the Dragon Radar works, but realizes that it's broken, presumably damaged in all the fighting. The next day, as the trio are setting out, Murasaki appears from the rubble of Muscle Tower and follows them, leading to the second time this saga, and in my opinion, the far funnier of the two, where Goku goes to take a leak and ends up pissing all over the enemy. The trio find the doctor, named Flap, and he agrees to do what he can. However, as he's getting ready, Murasaki confronts him. It turns out that Flap was the one who actually designed Ader in the first place, as he was forced to by the army. Now, some of you may claim that this explains away my previous complaint about how Ader has a pacifist nature, despite there being no good reason to have it given his programming. But it doesn't, because this is only filler. Sure, if Dr. Flap were indeed Ader's canonical creator, it would make sense that he might have programmed in a pacifist nature behind the Army's back, since he obviously was doing it unwillingly. However, this is only a filler episode, and many years later it will be revealed that Ader's true creator is named Giro, who is indeed evil and entirely loyal to the Red Ribbon Army. So it makes absolutely no sense that he would give Ader a pacifist nature. Anyway, a chase ensues, Goku defeats Murasaki handily, and Dr. Flap is able to successfully remove the bomb from Ader's body. Goku gets rid of the bomb, and the General White Subsaga ends with the bomb blowing up right in Murasaki's face, killing him. If the Colonel Silver Subsaga could be seen as the prologue to the Red Ribbon Army saga, the General White Subsaga is the first actual chapter. Like in a video game, Colonel Silver is just the prologue mid-boss, and the loss of the Flying Nimbus is akin to when the player character gets stripped of his power-ups and has to regain them. Then, the General White Subsaga is the equivalent to the first actual level in the game. However, because of all the filler in the previous Subsaga, a lot of the Red Ribbon Army's introduction here feels redundant. In the manga, Colonel Silver's men were out in the middle of nowhere, and the only real crime they committed was picking a fight with Goku after he found the Dragon Ball. The General White Subsaga is where the Red Ribbon Army really gets introduced as irredeemably evil, committing heinous atrocities like kidnapping the village chief and forcing the men in the village to search for the ball. That works in the manga because this is the first time we see the Red Ribbon Army do anything evil, but coming off the heels of the Colonel Silver Subsaga, we've already seen the army do horrible things like invading people's homes and killing innocent people. One thing about this Subsaga that does work as an upping of the stakes is Goku for the first time taking the fight to the Red Ribbon Army. In the Colonel Silver Subsaga, Goku was mostly reactive, only intervening when the army did something like invading the Ox King's village or burning down the forest. Here, Goku takes a far more proactive stance and actively invades Muscle Tower, even though the matter, while dire, isn't so urgent that immediate action is necessary to prevent irreparable harm. However, this Subsaga's main contribution to the whole saga is the way it sets up the pacifism versus pro-action main theme. Over the course of the saga, this will become the most compelling theme of this saga, and it starts here. Once again, I won't rank this Subsaga by itself, but I will instead give the entire Red Ribbon Army saga a ranking once I've completed it. So that does it for the General White Subsaga. Next time, I will tackle the West City Subsaga, which will only be 3 episodes long, so hopefully I can get it finished quicker than it took me to finish this one. However, I make no guarantees, as I'm currently swamped with something in my personal life, so please don't expect me to adhere to a rigid schedule for the time being. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and oh, don't forget to subscribe. All of those are free for you to do, and it helps out a ton. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.